Welcome to the second lecture in the course Physics of Nanomaterials. Today we will continue our discussion on nanomaterials and we will start with the classifications of nanomaterials. We will try to cover the following topics in today's lecture. These topics are classification of nanomaterials. We will give you various ways of classifying nanomaterials. Different end users like to classify the useful nanomaterials for them using different classification schemes. Why so? This will become clear to you as we move along. We will talk about the categories and examples of natural nanomaterials, incidental nanomaterials, and we will then finish this lecture by classifying the nanomaterials based on the chemical compositions. In the previous lecture, we have defined nanomaterials. What is the definition? Nanomaterials are a class of materials which have at least one of the three dimensions in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers. This is what we have seen earlier. So, if you say this is A, this is B and this is C. So, either A can be in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers, B and C are not, then also it is a nanomaterial. A and B can be in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers, but the C parameter is not, then also it is a nanomaterial. A, B and C are all in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers, then also it is a nanomaterial. But how do we differentiate these materials? How do we call these materials so that people can easily understand that either A is in the range of 1 to 100 or A and B are there, or A, B, C are all in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers. When I say A is in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers, it is not that I am confining that only A direction has to be in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers. It can be one of the axes. That means the B parameter can be in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers, A and C are not, or C is in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers and A and B are not. So, any of these combinations are correct. So, keep that in mind. So, if I say only A, it means one of the three axes, it can be any. So, it is, do not confuse that only A has to be in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers. Any one of the three can be there. This way of classification is based on the dimensions. Then there are ways to classify nanomaterials on the origin. How did they originate? And finally, you can also talk in terms of the compositions of these nanomaterials and then classify them under various subheadings. In today's lecture, we will try to cover all these three ways of classifying nanomaterials. Then you will understand why it is important, and you will understand that for different applications you have to classify group of nanomaterials using different nomenclature. So, based on the origin of nanomaterials, they are classified as natural, incidental or artificial nanoparticles. These nanoparticles are naturally occurring. So, what will you call them? As the name suggests, you will say they are natural nanoparticles, they are occurring naturally. So, if you see natural nanomaterials, they are formed without human intervention. The chemical reactions are not driven by human activities or human planning, or the scheme of chemical reactions are not designed by any scientist or engineer. These nanoparticles are occurring naturally or appear because of activities occurring naturally. They are formed through various natural, physical, chemical, geochemical or biological processes. Please note, it is most important that they are occurring naturally. And if you look around, these materials actually exist everywhere in and around us, in the environment around us. They are in hydrosphere or lithosphere or biosphere, they are there, and they have their own specific tasks which they are performing. Nature has actually given them tasks and they are performing it. Some particles are being asked by the nature to scatter UV light or incoming radiations. Some particles may actually act as the nucleation sites for cloud formation, and these processes are actually driven by nature. And it is not so that there is only one type of natural material. These may include minerals, metals, oxides, organics or composites. What are composites? Composites are what are composites? Composites mean it is a combination of two or more phases of same material or dissimilar materials to give us new properties which are different from the constituents, but the constituents do not lose their identity. That means you can take rubber and you can put some kind of salt or silica in it. Silica will remain as silica, rubber will remain as rubber, but when you talk about the composite formed by rubber silica, they will have different properties to those of silica alone or polymer alone. So, those are composites, and it is a very interesting field to obtain new materials with desired properties. For example, let us take the example of the soot particles coming out of a volcano. You take certain powder of it and take an SEM, scanning electron microscope. As in the previous class, what we have told you that scanning electron microscope is basically a high resolution imaging process where electrons are used as the incident beam. They emit secondary electrons for imaging. These secondary electrons are collected by a detector and it actually replicates the surface morphology of the sample which is being investigated. I will explain the functioning of SEM in the lectures where we will be talking about the characterization tools used to analyze nanomaterials. But for the time being, you can take it as high resolution imaging process. So, you can clearly see that the soot particles have particles which are quite small, and there are particles which are coexisting. Some of them are very small, some of them are big, some have different architectures, that you have a capped structure, some structures are smooth, some structures are agglomerated structures, whereas some structures are occurring as an individual subparticle. And this kind of distribution is called as inhomogeneous distribution of particles. What would then be homogeneous particle distribution? If you have all the particles which are constituting a sample, they are of the same shape, sizes and uniformly distributed across this sample, then it is a homogeneous distribution. So, what can we infer from just an SEM picture taken out of the soot particles collected from a volcanic eruption? That it constitutes of different size particles which are inhomogeneously distributed, and the size of the particles range from very small, let us say from 20 nanometers to 5 micrometer. Certain particles are agglomerated, and these agglomerated particles can also have slightly different shapes than those which are not agglomerated to high extent. So, just by taking this picture, you have been able to analyze and infer so many information about the particles which come out from the volcanic eruption. If you take the backscattered electrons from the same measurement, in SEM you can have two types of emissions, secondary electron or backscattered. You can also get information about the elemental compositions of these particles, but that we will discuss later. The categories and examples of natural nanomaterials can also be given. You can have geological nanoparticles, as the name suggests. What would those be? Those would be ones which are formed from geological processes like rock weathering, volcanic eruptions. We have just seen the example in the previous slide, mineral precipitation or any other geological process. Examples would be like clay minerals, silica nanoparticles. You can have natural colloidal iron oxides, various forms of oxides of iron, and they can have different shapes and sizes depending upon the temperature or aging process they have undergone. You can have atmospheric nanoparticles. They are formed, as the name suggests, from atmospheric processes like dust storms, sea spray, the plumes which are seen as a function of volcanic activities. You can have forest fires resulting in the burning of leaves, and then you have seen that small nanoparticles which are black in color suspended in the air, and people say they have very, very high impact on the environmental conditions in and around such fires, because these are small carbon nanoparticles which can have various impacts both on the natural environment around the place where the fire is taking place, or even they can travel long distances, and you can find that you can see the impacts of such fires on the health of humans. Such particles which are atmospheric nanoparticles include sulfate aerosols, soot, as I said, carbonaceous particles from natural fires, and many of us have seen this natural carbonaceous particles. Many of us have, as a child, have seen this nanoparticles which are carbonaceous, where you have seen the burning of a paper, a newspaper or a paper. Then you see, especially in times of winter where you are trying to lit angithi, then you see that when you burn these papers, they have these black colored soots which rise in the air and they are suspended in the air. But if you inhale those particles, it was always a very, very uncomfortable feeling which we felt. So, we have seen the impact of these carbonaceous nanoparticles even when we were growing and we had some processes taking place in our houses. You can have salt nanoparticles from ocean sprays, and then you can go on from one example to the other, and each have their own usefulness or hazardous consequences. You can have biogenic nanoparticles. As the name suggests, they are produced by living organisms, including those microbes. The next is biogenic nanoparticles. As the name suggests, they are produced by living organisms such as microbes, plants and animals. Examples: magnetites, which are basically Fe3O4 nanoparticles. These are synthesized by the magnetotactic bacteria. You can have biogenic silica nanoparticles. You can have calcium carbonate in seashells and corals, or you can even have protein nanostructures. If you just see the SEM image of these seashells, you will find that they are not as smooth as they appear from the top surface. If you see the SEM picture, what are the inferences you will be able to draw immediately. Before you continue on this lecture, I would say that please stop this lecture at this point and write down the inferences which you are able to give based on the SEM picture of the top surface of these seashells which are given here. You will be able to see that the inferences, if you have understood the previous examples, which you will be able to write, would be particles are inhomogeneously distributed. The surface, although at the macro level seems to be smooth, is not a smooth surface. The particles which are constituting the top surface of these shells are of different shapes and sizes. Some of the particles are in the range of nanometer, whereas you have particles which are quite large in size, that is, they are in the range of micrometer or so. Therefore, the properties of these shells would not be as those which will have homogeneous distribution of particles and the surface of the shells are smooth. This is some of the inferences which you can draw just by looking at this SEM. After hearing this, please compare what you have written. If you were able to write some of these points before correlating or corroborating with what I said, then you are understanding the lectures very clearly. If not, then you may go back and look at the previous two slides once again and see the informations which we can draw by looking at the SEM micrographs and then continue. This will make your knowledge concrete and you will understand more about the natural nanoparticles we are talking about at this moment. The next are natural organic nanomaterials. Just by looking at the name, what will you understand, or you will be able to explain to anybody else who is not an expert in this area? These are naturally occurring organic nanomaterials, and these includes the ones which are derived from various activities, and there are various examples of these kind of nanomaterials. You can have organic matter in solids and water, you can have nanosized lipid or protein aggregates in biological fluids, or many other examples can be given. So, it is very simple, but now if I ask you, why do you need these sub classifications? You will be easily giving me an answer that suppose we are trying to extract organic nanoparticles without human intervention, then what type of particles can I get? I will talk about the natural organic nanoparticles. Now, if I am talking about working on structures which are naturally occurring, but they have some specific shapes and sizes and they are found near the sea coast, then we will be talking about such kind of particles and so on, so forth, and therefore, the end user and the application of nanoparticles actually decides the classification of nanoparticles which will become useful to you. The second class of nanomaterials are incidental nanomaterials. These are also called as anthropogenic. The second class of nanomaterials are the incidental nanomaterials. These are also called as anthropogenic nanomaterials. They are ultra fine particles in the nanoscale region that are not intentionally manufactured, but they are actually a byproduct of certain human activities which are taking place. These include combustion, industrial processing, mechanical abrasion or chemical reactions. These particles differ from engineered nanomaterials. Engineered means you have designed and you have set up a chemical protocol by which you obtain a certain class of materials. Those are engineered materials. So, if it is an engineered nanomaterial, what would those be? They would actually be a set protocols which are followed to give us the desired nanomaterials. So, the incidental nanomaterials are different from engineered nanomaterials. This should be very clear to you, and therefore, at times they are uncontrolled and unregulated, and as a result, what can happen? That you can have large amount of such nanoparticles which can actually be useful, or they can have detrimental impacts. The major properties of these incidental nanoparticles are that, as the name has been given, so their dimensions are in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers, but as they are not engineered, mostly the shape and the size, that is the morphology of these particles, are irregular, that is fractal like, or if there are certain processes, then they can also be spherical, but you are not forcing these particles in these shapes, they are just stabilizing in that. The chemical compositions, as you have seen that these reactions are mostly uncontrolled, they can have various chemical compositions within a sample, or if you take from one batch to the other, the compositions can change. You can get these materials which are predominantly based on carbon or metals, oxides, sulfates or even nitrates. So, they are highly polydispersed, that means their shapes and sizes are inhomogeneously distributed, as we have seen in the previous SEM pictures. These nanoparticles can be reactive, they can get oxidized, or they can even get contaminated with hydrocarbons or metals. So, as the logic says that let us move from those types of materials and talk about engineered nanomaterials. What would be an engineered nanomaterials? You should be able to give an answer now. Engineered nanomaterials are the ones that are elaborately designed. You have designed the material using protocols which are pre-decided, and you have understood the chemical processes which the reactants will undergo, and you have understood the growth mechanism of these particles, and that is why you are able to control the end shape and size of these nanoparticles. All of these processes are well defined. For example, the growth process. The growth process is a competing process where the surface energy and volume energy compete with each other, and beyond a certain critical radius the volume energy takes over, and then the particle first stabilizes in certain shapes and then it starts growing. This we will discuss in subsequent weeks, where we talk about the growth mechanism of nanoparticles. They have different size dependent properties. We have seen in previous lecture also that you can just go on changing the size of the particles. Let us say for silver or gold, the colors which you will get from those particles are very different. So, we have seen that they have size dependent properties. Their applications range from science, industry and medicine. These materials differ from natural and incidental nanomaterials. You should be understanding this concept very clearly by now, that these engineered nanomaterials are designed with certain intentions. So, they have intentional fabrication processes. We have already understood the growth mechanism of these particles. The processes which are there that will drive the growth of such nanoparticles have been understood, and therefore, we would be able to control the structure, shape and composition of these particles. And why are we doing it? Because we have certain specific functions or applications which we want to obtain from these engineered nanomaterials. They can be synthesized using various synthesis processes such as hydrothermal, cryoprecipitation, sol gel, chemical vapor depositions and many other. All these things would be discussed. We will discuss these processes in the week where we talk about the synthesis of nanomaterials, and you can get various forms of nanoparticles or nanomaterials. Now, you can actually classify nanomaterials not on the basis of origin, but as we said on the classification of the dimensions. So, you can have 0D, 1D, 2D or 3D type materials. Let us see what this classification, which is most commonly used way of classifying nanomaterials. 0-dimensional nanomaterial means all the 3 dimensions are in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers. That means A parameter, B parameter and C parameter, all of the 3 are in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers. So, if I draw a unit structure, then if I have A, B and C, you will find all of them are in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers. Therefore, these are discrete and confined particles. Confinement means what? That the electron does not have freedom to move to long distances in any of the 3 dimensions. So, it means that the motion of electron in such particles are confined. So, it is restricted in all the 3 dimensions. So, suppose you have a structure where one side is 1 to 100 nanometers, whereas the other side is, let us say, 1 to 100 centimeters. So, electron can easily move along this axis which is 1 nanometer to 100 centimeters, but it is restricted to move in the other direction. So, it is confined in this direction, but it is easily able to move in the other direction. We will talk about these quantum confinement effects later, but immediately you will be able to understand for the time being that these confinement effects have significant impact on optical and electronic properties, and because of that they find applications in areas ranging from bioimaging, solar cells, drug delivery, energy storage applications and many other. Now, you have one dimensional nanostructures. So, these are particles where you will find that, for example, you have the material where one of the axis is more than 100 nanometers, but the other 2 are confined. So, for example, materials where length may be more than 100 nanometers, but diameter and width are less than 100 nanometers. So, the confinement would be in how many directions? 1, 2 or 3? Kindly answer in your copy before you proceed further. It would be confinement in 2 dimensions. Why? Because 2 dimensions are in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers. So, you have confinement in 2 dimensions and freedom to move to large distances in the 3rd direction. Therefore, they have anisotropic behavior. That means their properties vary when you move from one direction to the other. Examples could be carbon nanotubes, which are given here. You can see these are tubular morphologies, long tubes, but their width and diameters are quite small. Similarly, you can have nanowires or even rod type structures. The key features would therefore be high aspect ratio, efficient charge transport, which makes them useful in transistors, sensors, supercapacitors or battery applications. Now, we have 2-dimensional nanoparticles. Here what you will find that these are the systems where 2 dimensions are in the range of more than 100 nanometers, whereas one of the 3 is having dimension in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers. So, now confinement is in how many directions? 1, 2 or 3? Confinement is in one direction. So, it is characterized by a planar structure or a sheet like structure. as you can see from these SEM pictures of graphene or MXenes. So, they are planar structures. So, you have movement in this direction. So, if you look into my hand, you can move in this direction, you can move in this direction, you can move in this direction, but if you see the width, you can only move in this direction. So, that is a planar structure which is shown in the SEM pictures. So, it is sheet like structures, and there are various examples which are there. The key features then become they have large surface area to volume ratio. They are showing excellent mechanical, electronic and optical properties, and they are finding applications in a large number of industries. There is another way of actually characterizing these nanoparticles. Now, these are called 3D nanomaterials, and they are actually characterized by the term that all the 3 dimensions are more than 100 nanometers. But then we are actually moving away from our definition. Definition is saying that a nanomaterial should have at least one of the 3 dimensions in the range of 1 to 100 nanometers. But these 3D nanomaterials are ones which have the external dimensions more than 100 nanometers. So, it is a seemingly contradicting way of defining, but no, these kind of 3D nanomaterials are actually the ones that their external dimensions may actually look like the ones having dimensions more than 100 nanometers, but these are made up of nanoscale building blocks or features. They are actually not confined in any direction, but they exhibit nanoscale effects internally. So, you arrange these nanoparticles in an ordered fashion or in a specific manner, whichever is there. So, if you look from the outside, the dimensions are much larger, but when you start taking the property measurements, you will find that they may start giving you properties which are very similar to those expected from nanomaterials. These are mostly seen in nanocomposites or nanoporous materials, dendrimers or aerogels. So, these are class of new materials which are coming up and are finding huge applications in various fields, because they are actually able to combine the properties of a bulk material with that of nanoscale, resulting in enhanced mechanical, thermal or catalytic, properties. Hence, they can be used in coatings, as structural materials, gas storages, batteries, energy storages application and many more. So, these are also becoming very popular. Finally, nanomaterials can also be classified based on compositions, which are actually the chemical compositions and the constituent materials. So, nanomaterials can be carbon based materials, metal based materials, dendrimers or composites, or you can have certain more subclassifications. That is quite possible and acceptable in today's literature. You can have some subclassification based on your application needs. So, as the name suggests, carbon based materials are the ones which are composed of carbon, which can have different forms. They can be hollow spheres, they can be ellipsoids, or they can be tubes. Metal based materials would then have mostly metal as the dominant constituent. They can have dot like structure, and you have seen how these materials, nano sized gold, nano sized silver, or nano sized titanium dioxide, have different properties. Dendrimers, they are repetitive branched molecules. The name comes from the Greek word dendron, that meaning tree. So, they are hence nano sized polymers built from branched units, because polymers are what? Having main chain and side chains. So, you can have nano size polymers built from branched units. So, what is expected? These dendrimers will have numerous chain ends which can perform certain specific chemical reactions, making them useful for applications for molecular recognitions, sensing, light harvesting, or optoelectrochemical devices. They are also being used for drug delivery and other applications. As we had discussed earlier, we have composites, which are a combination of nanoparticles of different shapes of sizes of the same material or different dissimilar materials, and they have properties other than that of the constituents, but the constituents do not lose their identity. So, you can have various composites and they have very different properties from the constituents. So, these are the two major books which you can refer to for understanding even more about the lecture topics which were covered today. And let me summarize. We have talked about the classification of nanomaterials. We have talked about natural, incidental and artificial nanoparticles. We have talked about naturally occurring nanomaterials. We have talked about nanomaterials which can be classified as 0D, 1D, 2D or 3D. In next lecture, we will talk about the same 0D, 1D, 2D materials as quantum dot, quantum well or quantum wire type nanoparticles. And finally, we also saw that these nanoparticles can also be classified based on the chemical compositions and constituents which are there that build these nanomaterials. So, I thank you for attending today's lecture and will continue from here in the third lecture. Thank you very much.